Hi and welcome back. There is a lot of disinformation about the Philadelphia experiment. First of all, it really happened. But it wasn't about time travel, Einstein, unified field theory, crew members being sent in time and reappearing half embedded in the bulkhead. These were later ideas that were maybe a cover-up for a much, much more important experiment that needed to be done before the Americans really got involved in a war in Europe. This is that story. If the United States was really going to be able to help this tiny island of Great Britain, 3,000 miles across a large ocean, thousands of tons of equipment needed to be transported over the sea. Winston Churchill's greatest fear is that the losses on the transatlantic convoys would be so great that they would lose the war.
Off the coasts of Ireland, along the vital westerly approaches to the British Isles, the U-boats lie in waiting, 4, 5, and 6 of them together, working in flotillas. Like wolves, they will stalk a convoy for days at a stretch, biding their time until the chance of wind and weather offers the fattest prize to their torpedoes.
The threat from German U-boats was tremendous. They had these hardened bases in France and Germany, and the losses to Allied shipping was devastating. And then it got much worse. Ships were blowing up and disappearing mid-ocean with no submarine. What was devastating our supply line? And then one day, by complete accident, a German aircraft dropped this. It was a complete mystery. It was a mine, but not a type they'd ever seen before. But luckily, it had been dropped into the mud right outside a Royal Navy base. Of course, they took it apart carefully and discovered it had this inside it. This object is a top secret part of German technology. It's a magnetic detector. How it works is when a ship goes over it, it can detect a change in the magnetic field and cause the mine to explode. Britain at the time was blessed by having this guy, Charles Goodeve, a Canadian physicist. Charles's expertise was in magnetism, and he figured out how this terrible mine device really worked. Goodeve also came up with a plan to stop the magnetic mines working. He called it Degaussing. Now the word Gauss is named after this guy, Mr. Gauss, a German physicist who explored magnetism way back in the 19th century. Goodeve passed on his possible solution to the magnetic mine problem to Tizard's committee. who took it very seriously and sent Hill with the Canadians, now you start getting this connection, to do a project to protect our ships from magnetic mines. The ideal place to do this was at the Philadelphia shipyard. They came up with this amazing plan. If they could degauss a whole steel ship by wrapping it in cables and putting electric force in it, you could change the polarity of the ship so it wouldn't attract the magnetic mine. Just look at these pictures. These are ships, and notice the cables running around the hull. And how this worked is large electricity generators were on board, and it could only work really on larger liners and big ships. The cables were energized, and it applied a magnetic force to the whole ship, making it less attractive to magnetic mines. But there was a problem. How do you do this on smaller class warships? Wouldn't it be good if there was a way of wiping a ship with a magnetic flux that would make it non-magnetic? In both July, it turns out, and famously in October of 1943, in Philadelphia, a ship was rigged up with cables and generators were started. This was the Philadelphia experiment, an experimental way of demagnetizing an entire battleship. Of course, it was really secret. There was no way that they wanted the Germans or members of the public to know what they were doing. They needed the upper hand. They needed an edge over the Germans to win World War II. So a story was fabricated. Remember what era we're in. We're in a time where Einstein was changing the laws of physics. We were exploring the idea of traveling to space. So a kind of science fiction counter story was perfect for the Philadelphia experiment. And this type of counter information has continued. I'm sorry to burst the Roswell bubble again, but Roswell was a balloon looking for Soviet nuclear tests, and it wasn't a spaceship full of aliens. But that was the cover story, that it was out of this world. A perfect cover story and completely wrong. During the stealth era, Sandia Labs in Albuquerque found that they had somebody snooping on the base, and instead of locking him up, they cleverly, and this was a CIA plot, which I'm saying had worked in the past, they invited him in and said, "Oh, we're working on UFOs." And he went back to tell everybody that in Albuquerque they had captured UFOs. Of course, he was ridiculed. And of course, it was not true. They were working on stealth technology. There might just be more to the Philadelphia experiment than I'm saying. It is possible that they were also wanting to make the ship radar invisible. And I don't really know what kind of technology they could have used at the day. And possibly it went slightly wrong and there was a green fog and people were possibly injured. But it was to protect World War II shipping from magnetic mines. The truth is out there.